Can sleeping be the key to prevent diabetes? Well, if you're eating a ton of carbs and sugar every day, then probably not. But surprisingly, it can make a really big difference. Now, specifically, I'm talking about type 2 diabetes. Let's face it, most people right now do not value their sleep enough. Whether it's not getting enough sleep because you have to get to work, or not getting good quality sleep, or both. And there's no getting around the fact that we need sleep. If you try to stay up forever, eventually it's going to catch up to you, and probably in more ways than just being sleep deprived. But what about days where people simply don't get a full 8 hours of sleep? Instead, if they just get 6 hours of sleep, or sometimes even 4 hours of sleep. Surprisingly, you're going to be putting yourself at a much higher risk of getting type 2 diabetes and also a lot of other diseases. But today we're going to focus on diabetes. So I want to show you this study. So scientists did an experiment where they took 11 healthy young men, and it had them go from their normal bout of sleep every night to just 4 hours of sleep for 6 nights straight. Now, after just 1 week of sleeping like this, these participants were 40% less effective at absorbing glucose. Now, if you had taken these results and gone to an independent doctor who knew nothing about this sleep study, then they would probably be diagnosed with pre-diabetes. Now, scientists wanted to get to the bottom of this, so they started taking biopsies of these participants after the studies were done to see what exactly was causing their cells to stop absorbing glucose. What they found is their cells literally became insulin resistant. Their cells stopped responding to glucose. Instead of absorbing the glucose like these cells are supposed to do, they actually did the opposite. They started repelling the glucose. Now, this is just after 1 week of being sleep deprived. Imagine people who, for their job, they only get 4 to 6 hours a night every single night for like a year or years on end. If your cells can become so insulin resistant after just 6 days, then imagine what can happen after a full year or longer. And also imagine if you combine that with a really unhealthy diet, or someone who already is not so healthy in the first place. Because in this study, these were 11 young, healthy men, not someone who's a little bit older and already has a chronic disease and also has a very unhealthy diet and might not even work out in the first place. To know that just simply sleeping more or simply sleeping enough like your body is supposed to, that's one of the easiest things you can start doing to prevent these chronic diseases like diabetes. And there's also reports that when people sleep less, they tend to eat more. And not just any food, they tend to eat more junk food and carbs overall. And they'll also struggle losing as much fat. So this is another study and was looking at 10 overweight people, and it put them on a low-calorie diet for 2 weeks. The only difference is one group was given 5.5 hours in bed every night, and the second group was given 8.5 hours in bed every night. The good news is both groups lost weight, but the key difference comes in where that weight loss came from. The group that slept less lost 70% of their weight from their lean muscle mass alone. But the group that slept more lost more of their weight in fat and got to retain a lot of their lean muscle mass. So the 8.5 hour sleep group lost 1.4 kilograms in fat compared to just 0.6 kilograms of fat in the 5.5 hour group. That means that the group that slept more lost 57% more fat on the same diet. So really what this is showing, it's not just about your diet. These two groups were on the same exact diet. Imagine you're already doing the hardest part of eating your diet, which is so hard to sustain. And all you have to do is start sleeping enough to really start benefiting from that. Because, okay, yeah, you're gonna lose weight, but would you rather lose muscle or would you rather lose fat? Obviously, you'd rather lose the fat. So why not start sleeping more? But it's not just about sleeping more. It's also about sleeping consistently, sleeping and waking up relatively around the same time to match your circadian rhythm. When it comes to sleep deprivation, we have a lot of studies on pilots and cabin crews because these are the people that have to stay up for longer periods of time and often have to experience jet lag, where they're sleeping or waking up at inconsistent times that are not in line with their normal circadian rhythm. Because whether you're traveling west or east, your time zone is always changing. So for a pilot, it could be 9 a.m. somewhere, but their body feels like it's midnight and they're trying to go to sleep. Or it could be the opposite, where it's like 10 p.m. somewhere and everyone's ready to go to sleep, but for them, they feel like it's 8 a.m. Now, compared to the general public, pilots and cabin crews are more prone to getting a lot of different diseases, including cancer and diabetes. And similar problems are also found with night shift workers. In 2007, the World Health Organization announced that work that disrupts people's circadian rhythms are considered a grade 2A carcinogen, meaning that there is sufficient evidence to say that that is a probable carcinogen. Now that is scary stuff, especially for residents or other workers who have to work at different shifts. And they also suggest that women with previous or current breast cancer be advised not to work night shifts because of strong experimental evidence demonstrating accelerated tumor growth by suppression of melatonin secretion. So basically, if you are forced to work or stay awake consistently when your melatonin is high, or in other words, when your body thinks it's time to go to sleep, then that can literally cause cancer or make your cancer worse. Melatonin is our body's main sleep hormone. It's not the only thing that contributes to our sleep, but it is a major factor. And melatonin will start building up in response to our circadian rhythm. It doesn't just build up the longer we've been awake. It has its own 24-hour rhythm. So as the day goes on, as the evening time comes, our melatonin will start to go up, and at nighttime, it will peak. And then it will start to go down throughout the night, and by the time it's morning, our melatonin will be down. And melatonin is suppressed by light. So now if you're telling a night shift worker or a pilot that they have to work through the night, but they have to sleep during the daytime because that's the time that their schedule allows, well, that's not going to be good for their circadian rhythm because melatonin, again, is suppressed by light. But if you are staying up all night long and now you have to go to sleep, it's going to be really hard for you to stay asleep because you won't have as much of that signal from melatonin because you have all the sunlight around you when you're trying to go to sleep. Now, again, it's not the only thing that contributes to our sleep. There's also a molecule called adenosine, which is our body's sleep pressure, and this is independent from our circadian rhythm. The longer we've been awake, the more adenosine we get and the more sleep pressure or sleepy that we feel. But again, without melatonin, we're going to have a really hard time going to sleep and staying asleep. So if you want to prevent diabetes or really any disease for that matter, and you're not sleeping enough and not sleeping consistently, then you are not doing enough. Now I get it, some people can't control it. If you are a resident or a pilot or a different worker that has to work these night shifts, then there's really not much else we can do in terms of the timing of your sleep, but you want to try to make sure you're giving yourself at least 8 hours of sleep every single night. And to do that, you really need to spend more than 8 hours in bed. That means spending 8.5 to 9 hours actually in bed because you're not going to be asleep 100% of the time. No one has that high sleep efficiency. But if you're spending a little bit longer in bed every night, then that's going to help ensure that you're getting those 8 hours every night. Now, if you do want other tips on sleeping and how to actually improve your sleep, well, I'm going to put a link in the description below because I do talk about that in some of my other videos. So make sure you check those out. There's a lot of different opinions on protein. Some people think that you can never eat too much protein. Some people think that if you eat a little bit too much, then it's going to be terrible for you and you can potentially increase your risk of getting cancer. There's also different thoughts on where you should get your protein. Should you get it from animals or should you get it from plants or both? Well, there was a new study published in the